We know that change can be disorienting, but sometimes you really do lose your way. I grew up in a suburb of Philadelphia, right near Trenton, New Jersey. And every morning I drove to school. It took 20 minutes to get to high school, past the farm, onto 2 highways, and then finally to school. Always by way of I-95 North. A few years ago, I went back to my hometown, and I went to get onto I-95 North, but there was a problem. There was no longer an I-95, and there was no longer a North. At this intersection, my only 2 options now were I-295 East or West. So I had to ask myself, if I want to go north, do I go east or west? I guess if you go east enough times, if you turn east enough times, you will end up getting north. I pulled out my phone, I asked my GPS, and I kept saying, recalculating, recalculating, until even the Google Maps voice sounded a little bit confused. Eventually, I just picked a direction, and after 3 different turns, I got where I was going. I was a little more confused than when I started. Later, I learned that this wasn't just my bad luck. This change had been part of a 7-agency collaboration with construction and rerouting projected until 2036. But I won't assume that the directions will still stay the same. We've all found ourselves at an intersection like that. Paths that once felt familiar that are no longer reliable. With enough time, every road will be renamed, and we may not know which way to turn at all. The rabbis of the Talmud knew specifically what it means to need to find one's way amongst uncertainty. The rabbis, they lived in a generation right after the destruction of the temple. They were creating a novel rabbinic Judaism, but their roadmap of the temple, it no longer stood. They were rebuilding the highways of Jewish life as they went along. So it makes sense that the rabbis preserved this fascinating story about a man named Honi, an unusual sage who dealt with a world that changed before his eyes. One day, Honi ate a small meal and fell asleep by the side of the road. The Talmud says that a cliff of rock formed around him, and he remained hidden, asleep for 70 years. Honi is the Jewish Rip Van Winkle. After 7 decades, Honi woke up and found himself in a world that he did not recognize. He went home and he didn't recognize the people that lived there, his own grandchildren. And they didn't believe that he was, in fact, their ancestor, Honi. Next, he went to the study hall to visit the descendants of his own colleagues. He found them deep in debate on halachic issues, just as he had before. Tradition held that Honi could listen to all of the arguments in the debate and could quickly resolve any debate. So Honi introduced himself and offered to help solve their difficulties as he had done before, but they too did not believe that he was Honi, and they would not accept his help. I imagine that Honi walked through this new world and was stunned at what he saw. He entered a community that he thought he knew, but he found it completely foreign. For Honi woke in a world that he could not recognize. People had changed, the world had changed. In this story, it doesn't have a happy ending. Honi became incredibly upset, prayed for mercy, and then the Talmud tells us he died. In the lead up to this Rosh Hashanah, I've been thinking about how Honi must have felt waking up, entering a world that had moved on without him. Afraid and worried, I imagine that he must have been profoundly lonely. No revelation to tell you that change is part of life. This week, these holidays, they're about change. Each year we say, Hayom Harat Olam, the world is being reborn. That this year will be novel. This year will be different than any that has come before it. Teshuvah insists that we are never so set in our patterns that we can't change. For many of us, this new year finds us standing like Honi, looking out in a world that in some ways is the same and in so many other ways so foreign. A society, a country that's becoming less patient, more intolerant, and yes, more violent. Some of us look at an Israel that we so deeply love, but can barely recognize, hopeful for its future and profoundly troubled by its present. The change, it's not just political. In August, 700 million people were regular users of the generative AI app ChatGPT, one of a number of generative AI apps that are beginning to shape more and more corners of our lives. Changes in the way we understand and relate to each other across lines of gender and race and class. They create new opportunities to honor each person's uniqueness. And they force us to rethink and redefine the ways that we relate to each other. Even in my own rabbinate, I've been waiting for a normal year. 2021, I was ordained in the first of its kind hybrid ordination ceremony. I arrived at Beth Am a month later, having never met anyone in person, having never stepped into the building. When I finally arrived, I met Rabbi Berg, and he said, "You look different than I thought you would look." COVID has changed how we gather and how we interact to this day. Case. By 2023, it seems like we might have a normal year. And then on Shemini Atzeret, we got news of the most horrific terrorist attack in Israel's history. We didn't know exactly what was happening, but we knew that our Jewish world had changed forever. Forgive me if I tell you that I sometimes feel like Honi. And it doesn't take an industrial revolution, a pandemic, a terror attack, to feel like you're standing on the edge of a world you no longer recognize. I've sat with so many of you this year, after the loss of a parent, learning how to live with a degenerative illness, finding a new reality after a divorce or the end of a relationship, making a major career change, navigating a move, trying to relate with children who are changing and growing themselves, recovering from the loss of a house fire, a flood. Each of these moments, the big ones and the small ones, they're Honi moments. They're almost always unexpected. They're rarely invited, and yet they come. After they occur, we find ourselves on the other side of Honi's sleep, looking into a reality that we don't entirely recognize. When I find myself in Honi moments, I'm deeply grateful for Jewish tradition, for our community, and especially for this community, for Beth Am. You know that we've spent this entire last year celebrating our 50 years in Reservoir Hill. 50 years of building a community that values these pillars of Beth Am: justice, diversity, community, learning, and place. It's been a remarkable year, remembering where we've come from and charting how we'll carry these values forward. We spent the year literally and figuratively writing a Torah, which we will carry into the literal Torah, coming Simchat Torah, save the day. But if I really needed to synthesize these 5 values into one statement, if I had to summarize what we do here, why we make a point to continue gathering in a 103-year-old building, to sing the songs of generations, and to tell Torah stories of generations older still. If I needed to say why we spend so much effort and time and resources cooking meals for each other, advocating for justice, learning our tradition and teaching our children generation after generation, Lador Vador, I'd say this. We build synagogues so that we have a space and a community to ground us in our choni moments. So when we see a world that we no longer recognize, we know that we will have a place, a tradition, a liturgy, and most importantly, a community of fellow travelers that will support us. Synagogue, it's not a place to hide from change. We don't come here to step away from the deep issues of our day or the transformations around us. Rabbi Berg has taught us how to be in, for, and of our community. And of course, that includes being responsive to change, listeners in our community, and to become change agents when that's what is called for. The synagogue, it's a place of ordinary magic. Ordinary magic. The scholar Ann Maston coined this term for the everyday systems of support. Families, friendships, communities, traditions that make resilience possible. Ordinary because it's not rare or heroic. It arises from the everyday, steady human connections. And magic because it somehow keeps giving us the strength to breathe and live through change. Our liturgy is ordinary magic. It allows us to return and recite the same words that ground us, whatever this year has brought. Our holidays and our traditions are ordinary magic. We sit at the Passover Seder and make ancient stories new for our children. We dance on Simchat Torah, we dress up on Purim, we mourn on Tisha B'Av, everything in its time, grounding us in a history that not only changes, but also returns. Our life cycle rituals, they are ordinary magic. In grief, when we are shattered and lost, tradition shows us the first step. Tradition is given a practice which helps us move through. And most importantly, our kehillah, our community, it's ordinary magic. When a member of our congregant-to-congregant team makes time to visit someone who's just returned from the hospital. When a team of congregants puts together a community food pantry to serve our community and to honor one of our own who died far too young. When congregants stay late into the evening to cook Shabbat Kiddush so that the community has a place to gather and to take rest. I don't know what else to call that but magic. Of course, change, it's not just disorienting. It can also be wonderful. Emily and I, every week, see our two little girls grow and change before our eyes. Oh, here. What's the deal? See, here's the thing, I'm talking about you right now. Not in the script. Emily and I see each week our two little girls grow and change before our eyes. We're constantly experiencing cloning moments. It's overwhelming and uncertain, yes, but it's also been our greatest joy. And we're grateful that we don't raise our kids alone, but we're anchored by family and friends and, yes, kehillah. We have a tradition that grounds us and guides us forward. And believe me, Emily and I know that we're in for many more holy moments in these coming years of great transition. We will welcome many ordinary magic you have for us. This year, many of us, probably all of us, are going to experience a holy moment. And I'm grateful that when we do, we'll have sacred community to turn to. But I also know this. Community, it doesn't just happen. It has to be built and tended and sustained. So while you're sitting here during these holidays, make a plan to show up. Love to see you at services. I'd be equally thrilled to see you at a class or at a tzedek meeting, at a Bayit event, at a Jewish Discovery Lab parent program, I wouldn't even be that upset if he slept on Saturday morning and showed up for Kiddush. Because when you do that, and when you do any of these things, you are becoming a magician. Bring the ordinary magic that helps each of us thrive and breathe and grow and live through Jesus. Honi woke up into a world that he could not recognize. And in his loneliness, he could not find his place. But our story is different. Because when change comes, and it always will, we don't find ourselves. We wake up together. This is the ordinary magic of Jewish life. That when the world feels strange, we have each other, this synagogue, this tradition to hold us steady, not to shield us from change, but to give us the strength to live through it, to breathe through it, and to shape it with courage. As we begin this new year, may we face our Honi moments not with fear, but with community. May we carry each other, sing with each other, learn with each other, when we find ourselves at the intersection, not sure which way to turn. Even if we don't know the way, may we not feel Shana Tova.